to promote individuals' self-making and economic transformation. And as they did that, they clung all the more fiercely to the idea of the African's fixed racial value. In fact, as paper money proliferated, the value of slaves went up. Americans, in effect, banked on slavery. They banked on racial slavery. Now, the Bank of England, yeah, I probably do. Bank of England's chartered in 1694. It's the King's Bank. You know, it's where the King puts all his money. Any money that comes into the Crown goes into the Bank of England. It comes in the form of gold or silver. The bank could then use this money as a basis for loans to the King or Queen, to private individuals, and eventually to other banks. The loans would take the form of mostly of Bank of England notes, which were redeemable in gold, as long as everybody didn't show up at once, which is, of course, the magic of central banking. As long as everybody doesn't show up, it works. As a privately run enterprise, the bank was supposed to restrain the government's insatiable demands for more money while tying the interests of the wealthy to the fate of the nation. The amount of gold in the vaults and the discretion of the bank's directors, who looked like the guys in Mary Poppins, would act as a brake on the government's tendency to always want more money. The bank's notes, its paper money, became more and more the standard money of England as London became more and more the center of the British Empire. Alexander Hamilton's first bank in the United States is modeled very closely on the Bank of England. It's a private corporation which will hold the federal government's money and then issue its own paper money, which will serve as the de facto standard of the nation. It would be the largest bank in the country. It would be empowered to open branches in the several states, as they say, and it would have the power to check the excesses of local banks by, when it saw too much of their money coming into its vaults, it would demand the gold back. The first United States bank sets off, according to Bray Hammond, the author of the most thorough history of American banking, himself an enthusiastic Mandarinish central banker. He noted that the first United States bank set off a rage for banks, a bankomania. You're not used to thinking of banks and mania in the same phrase, but he did, because he loved banks. In 1791, there were only 4 banks in the United States. By 1800, there were 29. By 1815, there were 212. The number would increase exponentially afterwards. Hamilton's bank lasted 20 years. It was attacked for being unconstitutional, which it probably was. I don't know, maybe. That's always debatable. They charged it with allowing an English influence to control the economy. They accused it of both choking off credit and loosing too much credit in paper money. They denounced it as an artificial monopoly. But in 1811, the bank's charter was allowed to lapse. But Congress waited only 5 years to try again. They established a second bank in the United States, organized on almost identical lines, and opposed on almost identical lines. That bank was vetoed or allowed to lapse in 1836 by Andrew Jackson. It's the history of American monetary policy generally is very simply, it's this clash between people who want a very tight, restrictive, limited money policy and people who want a loose, expansionist monetary policy. And they're always battling back and forth. The history of the second United States Bank, among historians, is well known and relatively well told. But the history of money, the thing that people actually use to pay, is rarely talked about. It's gotten much less attention. And partly that reflects our tendency to treat money as what it is today, which is a purely functional given. There's no point in thinking about what money is, right? It just slows you down. There's no point in, I got a lot of it, look at this, I was traveling. There's no point in thinking about what it is. It's just a given. And it forms the bottom line in transactions. We talk about it as a bottom line. Money in the 1850s, 1840s, 1830s is nothing like that. There's no standardized currency. There's no standardized form. So we can't really talk about money. We can't really even talk about economics the way we would talk about it now. It's profoundly different. It's almost incomprehensible, really. Let me give some examples. All right, coins. The United States had a mint, and it had a system of formal coinage. Eventually it had 4 mints by 1840s, steam-powered facilities, issuing official US coins. These were the real money of the nation, made out of gold and silver. These were the actual money. But Americans never deemed them sufficient. And in daily practice, they continued to use Spanish, French, Brazilian, and other Latin American coins in large numbers, very large numbers. Numismatic historian Richard Doty says, the dependence on other people's money was obviously both embarrassing and galling. But political pressure for more currency ensured that from 1816 to 1857, foreign gold and silver coins remained legal tender. So if you were doing business in coins, you would find American coins, but you'd also find the coins of other nations which were completely legitimate as legal tender. Faced with an economy that constantly outstripped, well, to complicate matters further, nothing prevented private individuals from founding a mint and striking their own coins. You could make your own coins if you wanted. The Constitution prohibited states from coining money, but it didn't prohibit individuals from coining money. And in multiple cases, private coiners issued their own gold and silver coins. Between 1830 and 1847, for example, the Wexler family of South Carolina minted their own gold dollars that circulated widely between South Carolina and Georgia. They often enjoyed a higher value than coins from the US Mint. Faced with an economy that constantly outstripped the orthodox money supply, Richard Doty writes, Americans did as they had always done, they replied with an unorthodox money supply. And not just coins. Before 1860, before the Civil War, individual banks could print their own money. Any person or persons could start a bank, easily obtain a state charter, and some worthy-looking engraving plates and start issuing currency. We could start a bank. We could pool what gold we had. We could pick a design, perhaps my face, and a noble-looking Indian, and we could start circulating money. It's particularly attractive if you're an entrepreneur. You're in a small town on the frontier, say, near Cincinnati, and you want to start, you want to build an opera house. You could form your own bank, print your own money, convince somebody to sell you lumber using this money you just printed, and boom, you're in the big time. You're the Queen City of the West, perhaps. Or Porkopolis. I once did a little quiz called Queen for a Day, and it was an online thing where it was all the cities in America that called themselves Queen of this or that, like the Queen City of the Nevada Flats. You know, there's all sorts of fairly obscure ones, but none are as noble as Cincinnati. In ordinary life, a merchant might encounter not just a profusion of foreign coins, but hundreds, thousands of these different state and local banknotes. Some issued by marble-pillared institutions of impeccable credentials, others by backwoods enterprises with more ambition than assets. These legally legitimate banknotes typically circulated at a discount. That is, the farther they traveled from their home bank of issue, the less they were worth. So if you took a Cincinnati banknote and traveled to Cleveland, it would be discounted. It would be maybe 90 cents on the dollar or 80 cents, because the further it got from knowledge of the bank, the less it was worth. And in pretty much every substantially sized town in America, there would be a place where you could change the currency of one locality for the currency of another. There's a famous anecdote about a Frenchman who comes to Georgia and deposits $100 in a bank in Atlanta, and by the time he gets to Charlotte, he gets paper in exchange. His paper is worthless. The gold still has value, but the paper is worthless. Fascinating. There's close to 9,000 different kinds of banknotes that circulate up to the Civil War. Additionally, your merchant might encounter pieces of paper which look like banknotes and operated like banknotes in daily business, but which issued from strange hybrid institution other than banks. The most well-known example of these pseudo-banknotes was issued by a guy named George Smith, and they were called George Smith's Money. Smith ran an insurance company in Wisconsin and printed certificates of deposit drawn on his insurance company, and more than $1.5 million of George Smith's money circulated all over the Midwest. They certainly would have been found here. They would have been found all the way down the Mississippi River, because people want money to do business. Gold is scarce. Gold is hard to come by, and so they're inventing new alternatives. Hammond writes, there were unauthorized banks everywhere. Besides partnerships and individuals operating as banks without legal charter, there were also corporations without the name of banks that were engaged in discounting, sale of exchange, and extension of deposit credit.